Now, Silicon Valley Bank may be known for its operations in the tech hub it gets its name from, but it also has a big presence right here in Europe. The company has recently announced it's expanding to Germany and opening offices in Frankfurt, providing financing to tech firms and indeed investors. So why enter this market now? Phil Cox, head of EMEA and president of the UK branch at Silicon Valley Bank, joins us right here in London. Phil, Frankfurt was an interesting choice. I used to be covering the tech scene in Berlin in particular.
Right.
Why did you go for Frankfurt?
I think because of our longer-term ambitions in Germany to build a big bank. In Frankfurt, you'll find all of the jobs in banking, not just kind of the sales and relationship jobs. But I think Berlin is often called the center of innovation in Germany, but it's still the relatively small companies, a lot of the startup scene, a little bit like Tech City is in London. But really, technology companies are spread far and wide in Germany, and so one of the things we've been thinking about is how to cover, you know, Munich and Frankfurt and Berlin and other cities as well, because it's more spread out than you find here in the UK.
So you sort of wanted to be in the fintech hub rather than the tech hub, so to speak. But who are the clients that you're really aiming at? Because you are aiming at those startups, but also the investors in them.
Yeah, so obviously we start with relatively early stage companies, often lending alongside, say, a Series A investment from venture capital. But
you're
really
offering the loans?
Offering loans alongside the equity, alongside the investor plan, if you like. But then right through scaling up the company to larger companies pre-IPO and then post-IPO. So companies of all sizes. And I think Berlin is a beacon in the same way Tech City is, and how there are startups in Paris and Barcelona and Stockholm and so on. So you're seeing it quite pervasively across Europe.
What about Paris, Barcelona and Stockholm? Are you going to be serving them locally, or are you going to be doing that from the hubs you already have? Yeah,
so obviously the strong markets in Europe for innovation generally would be Germany, France, Scandinavia region and here in the UK. And so we have strong ambitions in all of those markets, and it's a question of prioritisation and sequencing the entry. So well, we're certainly working on it behind the scenes right now.
Talk to us about the activity that you're seeing, the loan volume that you're seeing. How does it stack up in the UK and now eventually when you look to Germany versus Silicon Valley where you get your name?
Yeah, so I mean, pretty similar. Obviously, from a technology point of view, California really dominates, and from a life sciences view, it's more the kind of East Coast and Boston. But we see strong demand here, and I think, you know, few banks are really focused on this space in the same way. It's certainly something that I think, as an organisation, you need to be really specialist in to be able to do it at scale. And one thing for us that we really focus on is adding value to companies around the world. And so we need to be in the cities that really matter. And so it's important for us to develop our business in these European centres as well. And certain of the European countries are focused on slightly different things based on their historic specialities. So in Germany, I think you will see fintech, you will see e-commerce, Rocket Internet. We're really fast at creating some of those businesses. But also over time, you know, a lot more technical, industrial applications. Germany, you know, very...
Siemens comes to mind, yeah.
You know, technical manufacturing, kind of software and so on. So I think it's exciting for us to be there, and certainly we've been very warmly welcomed.
Do you think Europe could ever compare to the sheer scale of volumes that you get from the United States?
I wouldn't expect that to happen in our lifetime, but I think Europe is much more smarter nowadays at embracing the US and partnering, rather than, you know, the rhetoric of old was we're going to create our own Silicon Valley. And I think now money is flowing across border into the best companies, and so investors in Europe can get a company moving. But I think when those companies really scale and they need bigger amounts of funding, then often, you know, you'll find money either from Asia or from the US coming into those companies. And I think it's much more about embracing that than trying to, in theory, compete with it.
How does that change the game for you guys when it comes to the overall risk, you know, particularly the credit risk with which you have to analyse these companies? You've got SoftBank, talking of Asian money. SoftBank's Vision Fund is based right here in London, $100 billion to put to work. They are accused in some ways of pumping up valuations. Many see it as a blessing, some as a curse. But how does that affect how you lend to these businesses and associate and assess the risk?
Yes, I think this is why it's harder for traditional banks to really come into the market at scale, because these are companies often who are still building enterprise value.
Yeah.
And so they may be losing money, they may be burning cash, but there may be several investors investing in that company. And so our bank's dialogue is not just with the management team, but it's also with a number of investors, and understanding the story of growth, the story of disruption, and creating a large company over time. And so you really need to live in the ecosystem to be able to make good choices about the right companies to back. But one thing we have seen as well globally, it's true in Asia and the US and in Europe, is the dollars are at all-time highs, and very strong liquidity in investor pockets. But the number of deals is slightly reducing, and so that kind of points to a bit of a concentration in the best companies. And that's why we've seen, you know, activities like SoftBank and other US funds raising more money to be able to double down on the winners.
Very quickly, I've got to ask you, in a week of political tension that encapsulates Spain, Italy, and of course we've got geopolitics here with Brexit, does that affect the startup community?
Well, I often think that entrepreneurs and disruptors like a bit of uncertainty because they see opportunity. And I think that traditional industries have for a long time been figuring out how industries are changing. And for me, entrepreneurs just break through that, and they're focused on becoming winners, and I don't think that changes that.